Welcome back to the Needlebook series. This series is all about slowing down, understanding our tools, and building a needlebook that truly supports hand stitching, embroidery, visible mending, and other textile work we love to do. Today we're continuing our work on the needlebook by creating our needlebook's front and back covers, addressing a universal approach to drafting Sashiko patterns onto fabric, and then stitching this particular Sashiko pattern and incorporating it into the affixing of the needlebook closure attachments, the button and these cords. And then we're going to learn a very lovely Icelandic embroidery that I'm dubbing the Dahlia stitch. You'll learn the cute reason why in a bit. Our focus is on practical techniques, thoughtful maintenance of our needles, and building a lasting and practical sewing notion. Let's jump in. So we'll start out by choosing the wool felt that we'd like for the front cover of our needlebook. And in a departure from the last version I made, which was a purple cover both front and back, I'm going to be doing two different colors on this go round. And I've chosen this bright yellow color, which is my daughter's favorite, and this needlebook will be for her. What we'll do is we'll cut the cover wool felt, and actually all the pages as well, in 4 inches by 4 inches, which is 10.2 centimeters by 10.2 centimeters. And this is my front cover. Yellow is her favorite color. And the inspiration for this book, I'll show you a little photo shortly, but it is a dahlia. And it's a dahlia that my daughter is kind of known for, having loved these dahlias when she was a toddler. And we have a cute little photo, which I'll put up in a moment. But she's very right now into also all the warm colors. And the back cover of my needlebook this time will be this orange. And we'll go ahead and get these cut. And yes, I should be cutting away from myself as opposed to towards myself. I occasionally forget that. Do as I say, not as I do. But there we go. We've got the front and the back cut. And they'll have different designs, but the back of my needlebook will, the orange color, I will be stitching the Sashiko pattern that is so adorable, that looks kind of quilted, and is what you've seen in the purple needlebook that I've been showing you right here. It has that lovely quilted look to it. So we'll begin with that by stitching that back cover, and then of course you'll just make two if you'd like to have both a front and back cover that are identical and that look similar to the book that I have here in my right hand, so that you've got continuity from front to back. Otherwise, you could stitch along with me and do the dahlia stitch on the front of your needlebook as well. And we'll discuss that as we get there. That's my front cover. And this is actually not wool felt. I was digging through my my stash and I found this eco felt, which is actually made from recycled plastic bottles. It has an incredible feel to it. Feels just like wool felt. And I was looking for something very bright yellow, and this was the brightest I found. And I thought, well, I'm not going to make it out of that, but it feels identical to wool felt, so we're going to go for that. All right. So my button for the front as well. Let's take a look at these covers and just see how they're composed. We've got this pocket on the inside, and you'll notice there's two separate pieces of wool felt. So the front and back covers are actually comprised of a pocket, or comprise a pocket. They've got lining on the inside, fabric lining, and So be thinking from your stash what you could pull out, just a cotton thin fabric that could line the insides of your pockets, allow things to slip in and out easily, which isn't always the case when you're dealing with wool felt. So that lining, I think, will be key. And the back cover, again, same, a pocket and a lining. Now here's that picture of my daughter when she was a toddler, and she loved her Dahlia. She was so proud. If I could have shown you the expression on her face, I would. But she's got a look of pride there, holding that lovely Dahlia. So I'm very pleased to be kind of making a little tribute to this experience that she's had. And you'll notice all these pages otherwise don't have a pocket in them within the middle of the book. So they're just two pieces of wool felt, different pages, front and back, that hold needles. So there's no pocket in between on a normal page. But that front and back cover do have a pocket. So we're talking compound kind of components to the front and back pocket. We're going to work just on the front cover, including that lining, both front and back. And I'm looking a little bit, based on that Dahlia, of what I would like the inside cover of the front to look like, and I'm choosing that light pale pink. And on the back, I'm choosing another orange. I didn't have another bright orange like that, but I have this heather orange, so I think I'll put that on the interior side of the back. This is not the lining, this is that second component of the back cover. And this will be the little pocket that is sewn onto that inside back cover. And I'll use the same fabric on the inside of the front cover. So there's the front cover, the inside is the light pink, and I'll have again that kind of mustardy yellow, I suppose. A lot of different warm tones because that's what speaks to my daughter. These pockets are both, I put the measurements on that little information bubble, but they're 3 by 2 3/4. We won't be sewing those on this time, but I'm just being mindful of all the colors that were, of all the components of the front and back cover that we'll be thinking about over this project. But right now we're doing the outside portion of the front and the back cover. And it's a lot, so that's why we're breaking it down this way. Let's get on to thinking about what color thread we'd like on the front and back cover, as well as around the perimeter of the front and back cover. Here I used green against a purple background, and of course that won't be the case this time. I think I'll use on the back cover these warm tones, and it's a variegated Sashiko thread. On the front, I was thinking in a nod to that Dahlia, I might use this variegated Sashiko thread. In the end, I don't go that route. I use the same thread as on the right, both front and back, but we'll get to that. I'd like to show you this book. I have many books about Sashiko that I picked up out of little free libraries and such. This one's by Saki Iaduka, and it just has a good example of the stitch that I've used on the cover of my first needle book, and I'd like to show you that here. The stitch is called komizashi, or rice stitch, and if you've never looked at a Sashiko pattern, I'd like to show you up close how you go about reading a Sashiko pattern. And so let's zoom in here. It's quite nice because it shows you step 1 you want to do all of the horizontal pieces to the cross, all of the horizontal stitches that run. So that's got the little 1 next to it, and the 2. Now the 3 and the 4 are all the vertical portions of the crosses. And that's what the next step is that you stitch. And then steps 5 and 6 are all of the horizontal stitches that you do that go down and to the left. And then steps 7 and 8 are all of the horizontal stitches that will go up and to the left. Of course, back down to the right, but you get the idea. And so don't worry, we're going to go ahead and stitch this together. And but I'll go ahead and show you in the book, in this particular book, she takes this stitch and then offers you projects that you might apply this stitch to. She gives you little patterns. And as well, she shows, and pardon the glare here, I'll see if I can find a better view of this. She shows you her samples of this stitch and how she's played with color to modify the look, the overall look of the stitch. Hard to see, but if I move it down here a bit, that might help. The glare is pretty bad, but you get the idea. She shows her sample work. So here we have the back cover, and this is where I'm going to be, where we will stitch first this pattern. Okay, so we'll move off the interior of the back. We just want the exterior back cover. And we're going to take your favorite fabric marking tool, whatever that might be. This is a blue friction pen. I probably won't use that. I have a white heat erasable marker. This is called Madame So. That's also good. I use that, but that one's out of ink. I think I have another, even another brand. Oh yeah, this one is the Lang and Koenig, and I've got both a white and a purple in this. I haven't used this brand before, but I'm going to get this one out and use it. So let's go ahead and mark up our pattern. And what I want to do is give a 1/2 centimeter border all around the back cover. This will give space or leave space for the blanket stitches that are placed along the perimeter of the back cover. It'll give a kind of a clear space for that. And whenever you're doing sashiko, you tend to place a border around the exterior of your work. Not only that, but you then stitch around that border. You tend to mark off a border and then stitch it. But we won't be doing that in this case. We'll leave it blank because we're going to be doing the blanket stitches. So I'm going to mark this up. Sometimes it takes a few swipes with your heat erasable pen. These are nice because you get your marks down and do your stitching, and then you just iron it, and all the ink disappears. And you're probably familiar with that, so I won't talk too much about that. But what I'm doing is measuring off a 1/2 centimeter along each side, and then drawing in that border. And then from within that border, we'll go ahead and start our pattern measuring process and get the pattern marked down on the fabric. So that's all I'll be doing here. This ink is interesting. Sometimes it doesn't show up that darkly initially, but give it a few moments and then it appears. So you'll see that happen as I go through this process. Getting it all marked. Trying to remember to stay on camera. And another side to the border. And the last side, which I'm marking off camera, but that's a 1/2 centimeter I'm doing there. And again, this pattern's called komizashi, which I think is rice stitch. And there are variations to komizashi. This just happens to be the one I liked. I liked that quilted look that it had to it. You can sometimes break up the diagonals that you stitch in and make them smaller, multiple diagonal small stitches. I liked this large stitch. So this is just the pattern I happen to connect with. And I highly recommend. Okay, so now, before I go on a tangent, we're going to go ahead and every 1 centimeter, we are going to make a mark along the border line so that we can make our grid for stitching. So you'll see that I move along. Yeah. If you have the opportunity to get a Sashiko pattern book, I highly recommend it. You know, people spend a lot of money buying fabrics that are specially marked for Sashiko, or buying stencils that give them the framework within which to stitch. But it's really not necessary. If you've got a pen that you can mark on fabric, then you're good to go, and you can recreate almost any Sashiko pattern that that speaks to you. And yeah, there we go. I'm speeding it up a little bit. There we are. So once you've marked both opposite sides with your 1 centimeter marks, you can go ahead and connect them all. And that'll form the vertical portion of our grid. I decided to use this ruler because I can see behind a little better, make sure I'm getting them nice and vertical. That's the real key when you are creating your own Sashiko patterns, is you want to take your time and get the measurements right, lay the foundation really well so that your stitches come out the way you'd hoped. And again, those marks will darken as time passes here, so they'll be a little more visible shortly. There are lots of different options for marking fabric. There's chalk, there's water-soluble inks that you just spray or submerge your piece in water when you're done, and the ink will disappear. I prefer the heat erasable pens, particularly with wool felt. I don't feel like submerging the wool felt into water necessarily. I mean, this is not a garment or something where I'm going to be washing it a lot, so I'm just going to use a heat erasable pen here. And now we have our verticals, and let's go ahead and do our horizontals. So again, we're going to mark every centimeter along our 9 centimeter side. Again, we lost a centimeter when we left a half an inch or half a centimeter border, both left and right, top and bottom. So we started out with 10 centimeters, we now are down to 9. So we'll place our measurements across, measurement marks, and this will all look very familiar. So I'll speed this up as well. I think you get the gist here. The other side. pardon my off-camera moment here, but I won't last long. All right, and so now we're ready to we're ready to connect these two sides, and then we're ready to stitch. So we'll speed this along momentarily, and at long last begin our stitching. I'll start out by showing you how to take a skein of Sashiko thread and most efficiently make it usable for whatever project you're working on. There's just a few little tips and tricks there, and we'll go over that in just a moment. Okay, so there's the last of our grid. Beautiful. All right, and again, that'll materialize. Just take a moment. So again, I'm going to show you the design, the overall design that we're working towards. And we've got the foundation for that now. So we get the thread that we chose, which is that lovely warm, almost sunset type. I love the greens and the mustard yellow in it that will kind of offset the orange nicely. So you remove that, the paper around it, and look for the knotted, there it is, the little wrap that's the thread that's tied around the skein. It's one big giant loop. So you pull that out and kind of unfurl the big loop. So now you've got your big loop. Here are the two ends. And take a contrasting piece of thread and just tie a nice firm, but not tight, but fairly firm knot at each end of the loop. There's one. Here's the other. And then take your scissor and cut off this loop. And then take that same scissor, so I'll show you how that's connected. There's a little piece connected to the thread. So now you've got that. Cut the rest right there at the same spot. And then just cut that little extra piece off. And you are ready for stitching. You've got one end that's cut open, one end that's not. Both ends are bound. And you just choose a thread and kind of hold near that top knot and pull the piece out. And it's kind of the perfect length for, kind of reasonable length for working with. And you're all set. So now you choose out your Sashiko needle, which I'm going to choose that longest one. The great thing about Sashiko is you load all your stitches onto your needle. And so I always like to use that long one, even in a small project like this. So I'm going to go ahead and thread and knot this. So the focus is a little poor right there, but anyway, I'm threading it. You know the routine. And let's knot the bottom. Sashiko, you don't always knot it, but in this instance, we're going to be concealing the back of this cover in our pocket lining. So we can have knots, and if you have a mess, it doesn't matter either. Everything's going to be concealed, but we won't have a mess, but I will use a knot. Generally, as I was saying, in Sashiko, you don't knot. And I just want to show you that we skip a space, we stitch. Remember, we're doing these horizontal portions of the cross. Skip a space, stitch it, skip a space, stitch it. That's where our measurements come in. So that's what we're after, and that's how we'll begin. We don't start on, I wanted to show you as well the thimbles. There are metal thimbles. I like both, but I find that leather thimble to be the most comfortable. So I'll take off my ring here, and I will put this leather thimble on. And it's not as critical in this particular project because wool felt is so easy to stitch through. You don't need a thimble to kind of push that needle through the fabric. It's going to glide quite nicely. I think you'll really like the feel of this project. But we've this is how, yeah, you push it against your thimble, and then you're really just holding the needle with your fingers, and all of the moving of the needle happens with essentially the palm of your hand. So we're going under, over, to get our every other centimeter stitch. And we're bunching up all that fabric on that long needle. If you don't have a Sashiko needle, you could just use the longest needle you've got, and poke it out at the end. We're always ending on the back of the fabric before we move up to the next line. So we've completed the bottom row of our Sashiko project here. Pulling that through, and then the other thing we always do when we do Sashiko is we correct for tension. We pull that fabric out a bit, make sure that there's no bunching, because it is true when you've got all those stitches on your needle and you're pulling them through, it can bunch. So you just make sure it's nice and flat, and then we're ready to move on to the next row of horizontal stitches. And just like in weaving, we started out over on the row before, so we go under on this row. Start out under, and the first stitch is not, the first centimeter is not stitched, and then we've got an over and under, so we're opposite of the row before. We're going over, whereas we went under on the first row. And we're gliding through this fabric. Feels good. Sometimes I revert to using my fingers instead of my hand because this is a simple project and the thimble's not as important on this one. But sometimes when you're working with a lot of fabric, a lot of thick fabric, that thimble is a lifesaver. And so there we go. Row 2 is done. That variegation sometimes appears a little more clearly than at other times. Make sure our thread is pulled through but is not bunching, so we correct for tension. Now we're ready for row 3, which will be a mirror image of row 1. So we start out with an over stitch. We are always coming in from the back, but we're stitching that first centimeter. And I started a little off, but yeah, this is a project, and you always go in right at that intersection. Try and come up right at the intersection as well of the two lines. And sometimes I'm a little off, but this is a hand-sewn project, and I'm not a machine, so it'll definitely it'll have a feeling of made with love is what the feeling will be. And so we're coming up at each intersection, going down at each intersection, and pulling through. And I think you guys are getting the sense for this. So we'll jump ahead once I get this pulled through, and we'll move to that last row. But again, we're pulling our thread tight, correcting for tension, and moving on to the next row. That's what our stitching thus far looks like. Moving on to the next row. I think I'm about to jump ahead for you. We come out at the intersection, down at the next, up at the next. and down. Okay, there are the first 4 rows. Every other stitch. Now I think we'll jump ahead because you've got the hang now. And here we are in that final row. Wonderful. Okay. So, I've got plenty of, that's what the back looks like. You can see at each row when we switch rows how that has a diagonal transition. And we check again for tension, make sure everything's great there. Now we're ready to do the vertical portion of the cross. So we're going to be stitching that every other, and we're coming up in the middle of a square. So it's gonna be a judgment call on this. You're gonna want to pay attention to. We don't have a line to trace. In other words, we're gonna try and. I do need another thread, so I'll get my needle loaded up. And we're going to come up in the middle of the first square and go down in the middle of the second square, up and down, etc. For each horizontal line, we're going to be giving a vertical cross. So, judgment call, come up in the middle. Don't worry, I'll move on to the center of the screen here in a moment. Sorry about that. Got a little off. Virtually blind as a bat, so sometimes I have to bring it closer to my eyes. Okay, here we go. We're going to go down the center of the next stitch and up the center of the following. So this time we're not following on a line, as I mentioned. But it's easy to find the center of these squares. And maybe it won't be perfect, but I think I can back up a little there. There we go. Maybe it won't be perfect, but I think perfect is the enemy of good. I think that's what they say. Or perfect is the enemy of good enough. Or perfect is the enemy of beauty or happiness. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. So we've made our crossbars on that first column. Checking for tension. And we're ready to begin column 2. So, in to form the cross, and then out again. Back down to form the second cross, and back up again. Sashiko can be very meditative. It's a lovely this Japanese embroidery is a lovely practice. It's used for, Sashiko is more of a decorative reinforcing, fabric reinforcing style of stitching versus Boro, which is more of a mending. Boro is their mending embroidery practice or stitching practice. It's called boro for mending. Sashiko is decorative, but it does have a purpose. It does strengthen and reinforce fabric. And we definitely want our needlebooks to last and be strong. Between this reinforced decorative stitching and using a bit of interfacing behind, we'll make a very strong cover. It won't be firm or hard, but it will be durable. So that's part of what Sashiko is great for. It's both beautiful and functional. And there are really beautiful patterns. If you ever get the chance to, Google it, if you're not familiar. I'm just checking the back. A lot of times, even the back of a Sashiko project, many times will look very different from the front. And will be equally beautiful, just have what seems like an entirely different pattern. Here we are in the final column for our cross stitches in this pattern. So again, we'll pull this through. Check for tension all along the fabric. Make sure lies flat. Wonderful. Okay, we're most of the way there. We're halfway there. So now we'll begin our diagonal stitching. I'm going to need another thread, but I'll tie this off first. Tie this off, cut off any loose threads, and then move on to the next and final phase of this Sashiko pattern. I hear my kitty. A little cleanup on the back. Again, you don't always have knots in Sashiko, but in this case, because the back it won't be visible, we're going to go ahead and use knots. Okay. Yeah, this quarter inch, I guess it's, so I'm talking about now I'm pointing out that we'll be doing the diagonal stitching, and which is this portion of the pattern. So we'll go ahead and begin that. And so I'll thread another needle and knot it up, and off we'll go. So we're going to begin right on the interior of that first cross. Come right up there, right in the corner, and down the next. Unlike the crosses, there is no gap. Well, there's a very small gap that is invisible in the diagonals. In this first row, there's just the one diagonal stitch. But in row 2, you'll see we'll come up in the next row, right in that corner, And now we'll go down in the next corner, and we'll come up, we'll take just the tiniest bite of fabric and we'll come up on the interior of the next cross and go down to the following. Again, a small tiny bite and up again and down into that last cross corner. Sometimes it's a little tricky to get it just right. There we go. And just like before, we will check for tension. Make sure everything lies flat. And the next row, come up at the corner. It's always nice to pull your needle through in that first stitch. I don't always do that, you'll notice, but pulling it through and working with the needle from the front of the fabric is always a better idea. Take that smallest bite of fabric underneath the cross and go down to the next. Another small bite. And down at the final. We are always moving to the back of the fabric at the end of our row. Pull the thread through, check for tension. Make sure everything's lying flat. On to the next row. I think you're getting the idea. Now, of course, if you're making a needle book, as I did the first time, the purple needle book, you'll be repeating this process and you'll be doing a second wool felt block, just like this one. There we go, down the last row. So that's one set of horizontals, or diagonals, excuse me. That's one set of diagonal stitches done. Now we need to go the other direction. And I've got enough thread left that generally I would take a new thread and start at the corner, but I'm going to go up the center of the block because that's where my needle ended, was right nearby. So I'm taking the closest next stitch. You might start at one side and move to the other side. I'm going up the middle, and then I'll move out to one side and then finish with the second half. I mean, you'll see what I mean. But this is that same stitch we've been doing, where we take a small bite, go under the cross, so that small bite is invisible, and it looks like one solid diagonal line. And we've got our first diagonal in the other direction. Check for tension. And do the next closest row. So I'm doing this upper half. Then I'll go back and do the lower half. Yes, and as I mentioned, so you'll be repeating this process and doing another one identical to this for your top cover, if that's what you opt to do. I'm going to be doing, in this instance, giving you a little bonus stitch today, where I will be doing what I'm calling the Dahlia stitch. That's not the official name of the stitch I'll be doing on my cover. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in a moment. We'll finish up this back cover here. The thing with Sashiko or any stitch, when you stitch fabric, it does draw the fabric in a little bit. So this block will end up being smaller than 4 by 4, 4 inches by 4 inches, or 10 by 10 centimeters. So it'll be slightly smaller. But I love that quilted look that the stitch gives. Isn't that pleasant? And I love this variegated thread. I like the greens and the yellows in there with the reds and a little bit of orange. And now let's move on. As promised, I'm going to show you another stitch. This is an option for you, but you can just repeat the last Sashiko pattern on a identical colored piece of wool felt. In this instance, I'm matching that Dahlia from my daughter's toddler picture. And I'm gonna, I used white last time. This time I'll be using the purple out of that new box, just to give it a try. I think the ink is actually blue, but. And for this pattern, I'm going to be tracing some concentric circles. It's going to look a bit like a dartboard. And in the center will be the button. And the button will be the last circle that I trace. And you can do more rows than what, more circles than what I've chosen. I've just kind of eyeballed half centimeter distance between the circles. But anyway, you'll see as we go along what this pattern results in. But it does end up looking a lot like a flower, and it reminds me a lot of, when I saw this stitch, it reminds me a lot of a Dahlia. So it made me think of my daughter, and this needlebook is for my daughter. So it's why I'm going this route. The stitch, there's a lady I follow on YouTube, Lisbeth Dane, last name D-E-G-N, Lisbeth Dane. And she's a Scandinavian, Danish fiber artist, or mixed media artist, and does some lovely embroidery and collage and paper, fabric arts. She does it all, textile. She does some beautiful things. I'm going to put a link to her channel in the description box below under more. And I recommend you check out her channel. It's lovely. And in this, on her channel, I was watching a video where she had, where she demonstrates the stitch that I'm performing now. I got her go ahead to show you. I asked her permission to show you on my channel. But I was watching the video where she demonstrated it, and she said she had gone on a trip to Iceland, and she was at a museum and found this stitch, traditional stitch, in a book. It didn't have a name. It's related to netting of some sort. And it really jumped out at me. As well, I was reading a book called The North Women, and learning a lot about Scandinavian settlement of Iceland. So everything just kind of came together, and this is for my daughter. So I'm dubbing it a Dahlia stitch because it didn't have a name, and I thank Lisbeth for showing us this, because it is a beautiful, beautiful little stitch, and I hope you'll check out her channel. She does it all. A lot of jelly printing. When she demonstrated this stitch, she did it on paper, so it looked a lot like string art, really, it made me think about the 70s and this string art craze, but she's done it on fabric as well, so I know it's lovely. So we've got our circles, and in the center will be the button on the cover of my daughter's needle book. So that will be the first of my circles. And so we're going to go ahead and mark this one up now. A lot of stitches with marking today. And I thought I was going to use this Sashiko thread, but I don't think I will, because that yellow is almost identical, and there's a lot of it in that thread. It's almost identical to the cover, and it would disappear. So I'm going to go ahead, and for continuity's sake as well, I'm going to use what I used on the back. It's going to bring the back and the front cover together more cohesively, and so I'm going to go ahead and thread and knot up. I'm going to thread the needle and knot this up, and then I'll show you how to go about marking for this stitch. So what we're going to do is, again, with our heat erasable pen, we'll make a mark at 12 o'clock, at 6 o'clock, at 3 o'clock, and at 9 o'clock. Then we'll divide these 4 sections. Oh, first of all, yeah, that's right, we'll extend these marks out to the next circle. Then we'll divide these sections in half, these 4 sections of the inner ring in half. Carry the marks out to the second circle. Then we'll divide each of these sections 2 times. It's about the amount we can fit in comfortably in that inner circle. So, to the best of my ability, I eyeball these divisions. They're not always perfect, but I'm doing my best. And I don't know, flowers. This will look very organic, is how this will look. That's what I'm telling myself. So again, we're always transferring these marks out to the next circle. And don't worry, those marks will disappear once I put heat to them. I had to keep telling myself that. So it was looking messy. So now we're ready to stitch. And what we're going to do is a series of straight stitches where we connect the inner circle to the outer circle. One after another. This will form the initial ring of petals in our dahlia. So this is pretty straightforward. And then as we complete this ring, we'll use the gaps in between these straight stitches to gauge where we place the next ring's marks. So these stitches will dictate our next ring's positioning of stitches. So it's important that we can't just mark this one up ahead of time, necessarily. Particularly because as you're stitching, you sometimes move one or two stitches a little off of the dot you made because it just looks a little better in a slightly different position. So it's best to make the next set of marks once you've finished this round of stitches. And that's true of the following as well. See, that dot didn't look right, so I moved it over a little bit. You could certainly be more precise with your dots, but here we are. So there's my first ring of dahlia stitches. Now we will go in between each straight stitch and mark two dots somewhat close together that both fall within the limits of the inner stitch. So they're both in between the bottom two straight stitches. So we do that all the way around the circle. Two dots in between those, and two dots in between these last two stitches. All right, and then we come up in the leftmost of a pair of stitches, and with the eye of our needle, the back of our needle, we weave under the lower stitch and come up and go down, pardon me, and form essentially a Y. You see that Y there? We come up again in the left stitch, in the left mark, with the back of our needle, go under the straight stitch below, the next straight stitch below, down the right dot of that pair. I missed it a little. And form the next Y. I move around a little less going forward, so sorry about the crazy nature of those last two stitches. So come come up the left, weave under the lower stitch, the most adjacent to the left, and then back up down the right hand mark in the current circle. There's the next Y, up that left dot, weave down below, and down the next left dot of the pair. Down the right dot of the next pair. We're going to come up the left, weave under, down the right dot, up the left, weave below, down the right. So I think you're getting the hang of this. Up the left. I do love the look of this variegated thread. Weave below and down the right dot. I'm still using my Sashiko needle. No, I don't need to be. This is not Sashiko, but that needle is nice to hold. It's a big old nail of a needle. Up the left, weave below, and down the right. Okay, so I think I'll be jumping ahead shortly. Yeah, right about now. And off to our last stitch of this row. Last couple of stitches. So an Icelandic netting stitch, which has no name. But I'm glad she found this in a book and took the time to learn it, and then thought to share it with us all. Great. Okay, next step, more dots. And I wanted another circle, but didn't have room for one, so I'm going to go ahead and make my dots in the space between the next two circles so that I have that many more rows of petals. So in between the two stitches in the Y, we're going to make, this will look all too familiar, we're going to make two dots. 1, 2. Next Y, 1, 2 in between the stitches there. the way around. All right, now let's stitch this row. It's slightly different. Come up kind of where I ended on the previous row, and again come up in that leftmost stitch. Whoops, that's the right. Come up in the left. Okay, when I turn it the right direction, it's the left. Okay, so here I am. Now, I'm in the leftmost dot. I'm going to go down, and I'm not going to just go under the one stitch, but I'm going to go under both legs of the Y. And then come up into the right dot again, just as before. Then we'll come up the left dot with the back of the needle. We're going to weave through both of the next two Y's. Down the right dot again. And we're forming kind of a V here, I'll say, or a U. It's looking a little U-ish. Up the left. Weave under these two legs. Sometimes you catch those little fibers in the felt. And then down the right dot. Up the left dot. Weave through the next two Y's, kind of join those two together. And we're almost done with the row. I'm skipping a few steps. Up the left. Through the Y's. And down the right. Pardon me there. Okay, and now we are off to the final row of stitches, and it's going to look very similar to our previous steps. We're going to be placing two dots in between each of these U's that we have just stitched. Lost my circle down here a bit. I'll do my best. Get it back. Again, it won't be perfect, but it will be pretty. There we go, and now we're ready to stitch. Just like before, we're going to weave in the two legs of our U's. And we'll go down the right dot. Sorry about that off-screen action. Gets better. I think I'm getting tired. Up the left. Weave the U's, the two U's. Kind of joining them together and down the right. Up the left. Yeah, I'm going to move that a little bit. There we go. That's, oops, weave those U's together. And down the right. Up the left. You know the routine. And here we are, final stitch of our Dahlia. Fantastic. Is it perfect? No, but I think it's nice. And it's perfectly reflective of that photo that I love so much of my daughter. So there are the outside, front and back covers of the needle book we are currently working on. Yours may look like two on the right hand side, or you may choose to do a Dahlia. I don't know, but you have the option. Okay, so let's go ahead and iron them and get that ink off. Take a look at how they really appear with no spots and blobs and marks of any kind. And I want to thank Elizabeth Dane again for allowing me to share that stitch with you. Please check out her channel. Link in the description. Let's give it just one more pass. There we go. Okay, we'll take a close-up look at these now without the ink. And they look like they belong together, these two pages, despite their dramatically different colors. Particularly they will once they get the blanket stitching around the edges, which we will tackle in another video. We have more to do on the front and back cover. So this is the outside. Okay, first of all, let's go ahead and get out our button and craft thread, or any thread you find that's strong enough to hold a button on. This will take a little bit of wear and tear because it's how we will open and close our needle book. So you just want to use a strong thread or give it enough passes through when you stitch on the button to keep it secure. I'm using this button and craft thread, and I'm using it double. I recommend you double your thread, and yeah, the button will go there. I love that button. It's a ceramic button. Local artisan created that, and thought it was adorable. They created the button on my other needle book as well, so I like her work. I'm going to come up the center and then string through my button. Your button may have different holes, or a hole, might have 4 holes or what have you. I'm going to try and align it in the center. So I'm going to try and go down very close to where I came up so that it's held right where I want it to be held. And then we'll work on reinforcing it after that. So I think you guys know how to sew on a button, so I don't have to show too much of this, but show you a bit of it. if you've made a cover, a front cover that's got the Sashiko pattern, then you'll want to find the center of your square. There'll be a stitch, a cross stitch right in the center. Oh, here I'm coming up the side of the button, and I'm going to go ahead and reinforce that by running the thread around and around where underneath the button. So it's basically wrapping around the thread that I've brought up through the center, as you do to reinforce a button, and then taking it back down below. I accidentally separated the two, but it's reinforced now pretty well. I think I passed through the button a couple more times. I don't show that, and then I knot it off. So that's where we're headed. But as I was saying, you'll be sewing your button onto the center of your block, and if you've opted to do the Sashiko pattern for both the front and back cover, then you just find the center cross on your block and do the same. Sew the button on, reinforce it real well, and then knot it here in the back. I end up doing a double knot. But again, we're going to be lining the back of this cover, so no one will really see all the stitch work you have here. And it will be inside, it will be the inside of a pocket, so even the lining itself isn't really viewed that much. And there's the front cover. Great. Let's see, where do we go from here? I think, oh yeah, I do a little bit where I'm thinking about these covers and just kind of lining them up so that you know that the next time we meet again for the next tutorial, we're going to be dealing with the insides of the front and back covers, the second side, as well as the pages, all of the pages. So we'll be doing a lot of applique and a lot of blanket stitch. So what I'm doing now is I've gone into my stash, found a fabric, kind of a fun fabric, to be the interior of the pocket, and just making sure that it fits pretty well. As I said, sometimes the fabric gets drawn in a little bit when you do a lot of stitching, so you want to make sure that even if you're measuring out this fabric, it may not necessarily match the cover you just made because you've stitched it a bunch, and therefore it may have shrunk somewhat. So I trimmed mine down, made sure the fabric fit, got rid of any little sticky outies, and we're not going to actually sew the fabric on. We're going to use fusible. We're going to use the interfacing, a very lightweight interfacing, which will serve to reinforce it somewhat. These covers, we want them to be nice and strong. So here's my interfacing. I'm going to go ahead and, because these might not actually be square any longer, and they may not be exactly 4 inches by 4 or 10 by 10 centimeters, I go ahead and cut my interfacing right along the edge of this fabric. Get it to be identical in size, even though it doesn't necessarily hit the 4 by 4 mark. Okay, so that's the fabric and the interfacing. And that will, of course, go on the back, yes, of the back cover. And don't worry, we're going to attach our elastic before we attach the fabric and interfacing to the back cover. So we've got our button on, our front cover, we've got all the pieces cut out. And now let's go ahead and attach our elastic. All right, so everybody's elastic is going to be a little different. Yours may not look like this. You may opt for some other attachment. What I did was I got some elastic that could basically triple in size on one side. So it's about 2 inches when it's unstretched, and it goes out to 6 inches when I pull comfortably to 6. It could have gone a little further, but it depends on how thick your needlebook will be. But I would say that if your elastic is slightly wider, unstretched, slightly wider when in loop than the back cover, it just passes that edge, it's going to be perfect for stretching over your book and holding it closed tightly. So I can't be more exact than that, except I will say that in this case, with my elastic and with its stretchability, I feel like, so the block itself is 4 inches. I will measure out 12 inches, and that will accommodate the knot that will take up some of the elastic in the middle, as well as the 2 loops. So I feel like 12 inches for this elastic is going to be adequate. And I think you should just use your judgment, but know that you're going to be able to stretch elastic, and yeah, it's a hard call, but I'm using 12 inches here, and I think you'll be safe if you can kind of judge that you want it to stretch around the front and back cover, which are both 4 inches, and maybe up another 2 on both sides. So that's 8 and 4, that's 12. And despite the fact that the knot will take up some of the elastic, I think that'll be adequate. And I hope that makes sense. Again, the elastic is so variable that it's hard for me to give you a hard and fast rule. But you're not going to be too far wrong, and elastic is stretchy. And you're going to be fine. If you just give yourself adequate, and I would say give yourself 12. This is not exceedingly stretchy. This is just kind of your average stretchy elastic that I'm using. But I'm not sure how to measure that. In terms of stretchiness, I don't think there's like a stretchiness measure. I'm making a very good solid knot here. I just made a bow knot because what we're going to do is sew this down. So I just want the loops to be comparable. And I'm going to pass that needle through the knot many times, ensuring I get I catch all the different legs of this knot, of the elastic when I do so that I'm really sure it's secure. So again, I've used button and craft thread. I'm going to double it. I've used white because my elastic is white. Yours may not be white. I want it to disappear, the thread. So I'm going to thread this needle, double it, knot it. I'm going to find the center of my block. This is one way to find the center. Fold it in quarters. And you say, aha, that's the cross that's right in the middle. Place your knot there. See how those loops just exceed the edge of the fabric. I'm going to pull that through and then take the thread directly through the center of the knot. I'm going to go back down in a different location, catching different legs of the knot itself. And I'm going to come up and down multiple times. Now, this elastic cording doesn't have a name. I bought it at a craft recycle store, so I'm sorry, can't give you more specifics on this exact cordage that I'm using. But I think if you just use your judgment, and you've got some moderately stretchy cording, you can't go too wrong. If your loops just span the back of that of your needle book, and it's moderately stretchy, it will come around and wrap around your button in the front. So I feel like that's pretty secure. I'm going to knot that off. Oops, I got the ends in there. There we go. I'm going to give it a double knot. I guess you don't need to see that. Then I'm going to cut the excess elastic off, clean that up a bit. And there we have it. So we have our two closure items, the button and the elastic cord, attached. Give it a good few stretches, and it will also change shape and grow in length, and over time will change. So now let's go ahead and, because we've got everything we need on the cover, we'll not be sewing anymore, we can conceal everything behind our fabric lining. So we put our interfacing down, put our fabric down, and if you were really good and didn't do as I did and instead do as I say, you would take your cutting pad out and do this on your wool pad. Iron, we're going to iron, and unfortunately I forget this time around, and I'm ironing on my cutting mat, which is not ideal. But anyway, what we're doing now is we're adhering the fabric, the liner fabric, to the cover fabric. We have to go around that button. The button's bulky. So you have to kind of go around the button and then go on the button. Get all sides of the fabric adhered. And this just gives a bit more strength to the cover. But it's not rigid in any way. It's still very soft. Feels good to the touch. And that's the reason for the cloth. We had a little bit of the fusible that peeked through and beyond the fabric. Now I'm going to trim off any areas that are visible from the front. If the edges aren't perfect behind, that's okay. Because it will be inside the pocket. It'll just be visible when we reach in and out of the pocket, and we'll only see the very top ever. So it's not highly visible, but it's a nice little peekaboo. And it makes, again, items slip in and out of that pocket a little more readily. So that's the exterior top cover. And now we're ready to do the bottom cover, the back cover, exterior. So again, tuck in any threads, put our interfacing down. Do this on your wool pad, not your cutting mat. I figured this out halfway through. Get everything lined up nicely. And again, use the fabric between this and your iron, just to protect your iron. I'm just getting it perfectly lined to the extent I can. Okay, cover that up. Yeah, there's a little schmaltz on my fabric, so I'm turning it over. Really cover all the edges. There we go. And to adhere this liner to the cover. Oh, my poor cutting mat. I think I just realized the cutting mat. Okay, onto the wool pad. A couple more passes with the iron. These things happen. There we go. Do any trimming. Now this will look very different when we get our blanket stitches on. I think it'll really tie the front and back together. Okay. got a few ridges there that I'll iron out from the elastic cordage. But, so now we've got our front and back covers made. And I hope you found these instructions to be effective, and you can get your covers all thrown together for our next session, where we will be focusing on the back side of this pocket, as well as each of the pages within the book itself. So your homework this time, aside from making these covers, is, we'll talk about stitching on the pockets, the back cover, the back to the front cover, as well as the back to the rear cover, and then the applique on each page, the names themselves, the labels, and each of these shapes. Now, you may want to think about, and your homework is to think about what kinds of shapes you want. Maybe you want abstract shapes like these here, or maybe you want different shapes, maybe series of shapes, leaves, flowers. I might do flowers in this book, given the book and the person it's for, but you could do shells, fruits, animals, I don't know. I'm certain there are lots of options. Or you could just do shapes like this. It was a lot of fun to just kind of randomly create these shapes. So you be thinking about that, and I look forward to our next steps in this project. Until then, take care, and I hope you found the instructions in this video clear, and that you have success with putting together the covers of your book. Until next time, bye-bye.